Evening. My name is Ivy Summers, and I am the co-president for Joshua here in Green Bay. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight as we gather in community to learn more about the role of Indigenous food and Thanksgiving. As a reminder for those of you in Zoom, please make sure your microphones are muted, and we will definitely have time carved out after the presentation to go over any questions that arise. So please feel free to use the chat feature for any questions that you might have. And I want to introduce Joshua's community organizer, and her name is Maureen Perkins, and she's going to share a little bit more about Joshua. Maureen?
Hello, my name is Maureen Perkins. I'm the community organizer for Joshua Justice Organization, Sharing Hope and United for Action. My Oneida name is Yutlela Halha, which means she puts lightning on it. And I am Wolf Clan, which is Wagwaho Niwaki Taloda. Joshua is a grassroots nonprofit 501(c)(3) social justice organization. Joshua is a coalition of communities in Brown County dedicated to building and deepening relationships among the community. We empower and equip people to work together for justice and community building. Joshua builds relationships in the public and private sector to advance issues which represent our common faith values. We seek to identify and act on root causes of poverty, oppression, and injustice. Tonight's discussion is brought to you by Joshua to shed some light on the Indigenous cultures and food as we celebrate Thanksgiving and highlight some of the foods that may be on your plate for the Thanksgiving dinner. We also shed light on an alternate celebration of resilience for Native people. I would like to introduce to you the son of our presenter, Braxton. He will be reciting the Thanksgiving address in the Oneida language. This address is given when we gather together to give thanks to everything that has been provided for us on this earth, from the stars to the water to the wind to the medicines and down to the grass and everything in between. The Thanksgiving address brings us together in gratitude. Let us welcome Braxton as he shares his gift of the Oneida language with us this evening.
Kaya tino wela du unkoiho gut ni kanuka o hunda wela suha amaska andeses oda hasua jiha wajistotua we nido ujistokulu kaina wedege stoin delio kaina diso dane do. What that means is that we give thanks to the Creator and everything that He gave to us. We give thanks to the Creator because He gave us, and so we give something to Him and back in return. We give thanks to the Creator so we can always be obliged to have Him overwatch us. We give thanks to the Creator so we can always love Him and He'll love us back.
Thank you so much, Braxton. That was absolutely perfect. It's my pleasure to introduce Jamie Betters. Jamie is a member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin and has been working on food sovereignty initiatives for the past 17 years. She also serves as a project manager on an Indigenous diet and wellness project and is the manager at the Oneida Cannery, where she specializes in processing of Oneida heirloom white corn. Jamie has championed USDA value-added grants that have allowed the Oneida Nation opportunities to learn, research, and produce raw goods to enhance the value of certain commodities that the Oneida Nation grows. As a result, their product lines have expanded. And before we close, I will make sure to let you guys know where you can pick up some of those products. Additionally, Jamie assists with food processing and preservation. She creates educational opportunities and offers assistance to strengthen food sovereignty for the Oneida Nation. For 12 weeks over the summer, Jamie works with the Oneida youth to teach origins of traditional foods and promote capacity building. Through the program, youth harvest, process, and market various nutritional and medicinal items to encourage the connection between wellness and food. Through Indigenous Foods and Medicine, Jamie supports community members with food preservation through traditional and conventional teaching methods that strengthen self-sufficiency and build community. Please join me in welcoming Jamie Betters.
Sagali Slugwick, Jamie Betters Nayungyat. Hello, everyone. I'm incredibly honored to be here today. I always get so humbled when I hear my bio, but then I get a little teary-eyed and I think about the amazing work that I get to do. And sometimes I even get to do these really cool presentations. So again, I'm really honored to have been invited to be with you all tonight to talk a little bit about you know, the day of mourning and Thanksgiving. You know, we'll definitely talk about some of the successes within food production and all of that good jazz that I do. But I want to kind of talk a little bit about the history piece. And it's really important for us to really talk about that. And I know that at times it can be really emotionally draining, but it's really crucial that we have that knowledge and exactly what is that day of mourning? You know, what really is that all about? And it's really the remembrance and the acknowledgement, and also sometimes that spiritual connection, and the protest of racism, you know, and oppression, which we continue to experience. It's a constant brutal reminder too of the genocides of Native people, the theft of our land, the assault on our culture, the rape of our women. And you know, because there's these myths and these storylines that is damaging to Indigenous people and Indigenous rights, you know, because Thanksgiving is about welcoming the pilgrims to America and how we taught them how to live, and how we sat down together and that we could give them our lands, right? And so that they can create this great nation of liberty and opportunity and Christianity for the common good of everyone, right? But it's to profit. And so we tend to forget about that, or we don't want to shed so much light on some of the damage of the story, the real story, because it's an American holiday, right? And that the word evokes around the images of football, of roasted turkeys and fried turkeys, you know, and pumpkin pies, and family. And so when we talk about even that, and we also want to kind of, you know, bring some acknowledgement, because when we talk about even you know, about Plymouth Rock, you know, they didn't land at Plymouth Rock. Plymouth was already there, a village with clear fields, just, you know, beautiful lands that of course you would want, right? And springs, and definitely a lovely place to settle, right? So why was it so available? You know, because the reality is because Native people who have been living there, you know, were now corpses. They were plagued, and they were, you know, completely wiped out. So then we have to acknowledge the mass murders, and we don't always want to talk about those because, you know, of that traumas, you know, as we deal with generational trauma and historic trauma. And because the stories, there's all different types of stories about what happened, and even the story of Tonto and how he was this great Wampanoag man who helped the pilgrims, and he learned English, and he lived on site with them, and he taught them how to grow corn, and he showed them where the best fishing spots were and the best berry spots were. And as Indigenous people, we don't share that with anybody. Look at even our dog Conrad knows, like, you don't share those berry spots with nobody, especially those fishing spots. So already those are red flags, you know, with some of that storyline, you know, because the reality was that he was captured by the English, you know, and he was later sold into slavery, and he went to England, and that's where he learned English, you know. And so when he came back is when he found out that his entire tribe, they were gone because of smallpox. And so can you just imagine? It wasn't about just breaking bread and here, I'm going to share my land with you. You know, it was more than that. And so that's why we have that day of mourn, is to acknowledge, you know, the traumas that we deal with, and because we deal with them today. You know, we have a past president who does not want to acknowledge Columbus Day, but or not acknowledge Indigenous Day, but rather acknowledge Columbus Day. And again, Conrad's barking. He must know what's up. Sorry about that. We got a new puppy, and so Braxton, bring him into the room. Thank you. He hears us talking about all kinds of stuff, so he's definitely part of our family here. So so again, we want to acknowledge and we want to talk about those things, but we also want to talk about the thanks of it. Even today, I mean, we're constantly learning, and even for myself, I'm not a historian, right? I definitely don't make or try to preach about that, and I work heavily with Indigenous foods, and that connection that it brings to me is something that I want to continually share. And a lot of our foods, you know, we talk about repatriation and bringing seeds back to Indigenous nations, and that is a connection that we are bringing with different natives within even like trade with our food pathways. And so even this year when we're talking about that Thanksgiving dinner, it's really about thinking that we have the ability, that resilience, that we're still here. We're still here. We are still here. And we are going to continue to fight for our land. We're going to continue to fight for our water. We're going to continue to fight for clean air. We're going to continue to fight for our foods. Even when we talk about foods against Monsanto and then wanting to come in on our Indigenous seeds, you know, and patent them, we're going to continue to fight back, and then be able to share what we know. And that's the great thing about what I get to do within my profession. And really, it's become this way of life. And I'm incredibly grateful that this is what I get to do. And let me tell you, I'm not going to say that I started off and I was so connected and so thankful. No, it was just a gig out of college, and I was supposed to just be doing this for 90 days. And I grew up in Oneida, so I definitely have grown around our foods. I just wasn't as connected as I am today. And so again, I have the ability to do advocation on what it is that I do, and awareness within our community about our Indigenous foods, about an Indigenous diet. We're colonized. Yes, we are. So we're finding that balance, right? And we have that ability to hunt. We have the ability to gather. We have the ability to forage. We have the ability to grow, and we have the ability to save our seeds. And that's empowerment. You know, that's enrichment. And that's kind of what I would like to share every year with my son, with our community, and not just every year, and not just one time during the year, but like I said, incorporating this as a way of life. And so that it isn't such a day of sadness all of the time, but it's a constant reminder, you know, of the stuff that we deal with even today, but it's also that constant reminder of how strong we are. And we talk about resilience. I mean, that really, it's not a buzzword. It's not a buzzword. That's really what we deal with. And so, so yeah, so I'm really excited. I probably talked really quickly about it all, but I love engagement. I love engagement. And so I love to be able to have dialogue. And so please, if you have any questions, let's talk, let's chat.
Jamie, this is Ivy.
Hi.
Question, yeah. What led you to dig deeper into the work around preserving Indigenous native seeds?
It was really, I was about 15 years ago, and I had the opportunity to go to Taos, New Mexico and we were in kind of a room to just talk about Monsanto. That's what we were doing, in all honesty. And we were talking about how are we able to protect our seed when they are coming in. You know, they were definitely coming in. I was like 23 years old. I didn't fathom it. I didn't understand it. I wasn't as connected to it. But what I heard was that somebody was trying to take something of ours. That's what I heard. So then it became like, I needed to learn more. And I think I kind of got used to being able to have seeds. And then when I kind of digged a little bit deeper even, I was just like, wow, are we caring for these seeds? We have them. And is this just saying that we have a seed bank? Is this just saying that this is what we're doing? But what is it are we doing? Because these seeds are not alive. They've been sitting dormant. And we have to give thanks to Norton Rickard from Tuscarora. And he gave us those seeds to really get our community focused on those indigenous foods. And so we're forever grateful. And it's our responsibility to share them, because that's what happened with us. And so, yeah, and each year I just kind of get a little bit stronger connected to a seed. I can't explain it. And I love those three sisters like nobody's business, right? The corns, beans, and squashes. And it's universal. You've all heard of them. And so, but I don't like the sister squash. Her and I don't get along very well. But this year, with the Indigenous Wellness Diet, we had a squash and wild rice challenge. And we had about 37 community members pick up these kits. And I was dumbfounded that that was probably not the word. It was amazing to me that they had so much fun with squash. And I wasn't going to have fun with it at all until I seen them have so much fun. And then I kind of just then instantly got a little more connected with her. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
So you talked about the three sisters. Could you elaborate for those of us that maybe don't know the story of the three sisters, what that is and what that means?
Yeah, the corns, beans, and the squashes. We see that the corn is the eldest sister, and that the beans, they trellis around her and they bring the nitrogen and they grab it from the air. And the squash is to prevent any rodents from going and attacking because they got a prickly side of them. And so they intertwine and they work just amazingly together. And so, yeah, the three sisters is forever our sister. But you know, one sister that we leave out quite often, and we've been having a lot of fun the past 2 years, is the sunflower. So I also want to mention the sunflower and how important she is as well.
Yeah. So as we kind of, in the interest of deconstructing Thanksgiving, one of the questions is if you were be able to please share what an Indigenous Thanksgiving gathering that honors Native cultures would look like, as far as blessings, gratitude, food, activities.
Yeah, so just as we opened up today, we always will open with our Ganahila Duksla, our Thanksgiving address that, as Maureen said, acknowledges everything, right? And then we have this sharement of our Indigenous foods. So when we talk about those three sisters, you know, it's really about bringing them to the table and sharing it. So it's our corn soups, it's our corn mush, and with those beans go into those soups, and it's our Ganastoha, our cornbreads. And that's kind of the other responsibility that I have at the cannery when we talk about food production, is the access of our Indigenous foods to our community members. So we can go back and forth about the price points of that, but it's not about to make $1. We don't look at it as the golden nugget. We look at it as about sustenance. So we're giving things and we're having a social. So there's songs around there. There's probably the women's dance and whatnot. And then there's drinks, so like our awahit, our strawberry drink, our blackberry drink. So that's really kind of probably a lot of what you'll see in a deconstruction and what we've done previously and to other nations. So it's very similar in the sense of bringing our foods together, bringing our language together, sharing who we are as Ungwehui people, you know, and as Oneida people too.
What are some of the foods that we might find on our tables that have roots in Indigenous foods?
Yeah, I kind of failed to mention that at the beginning, but that's the irony of your dinner, because you have turkey, right? You have turkey and potatoes, not so much. They came a little later on. you have cranberries and let's see, yams even too kind of came a little bit later on, but still. So that's kind of what's really exciting. And even for this year, not even this year, but what I see about really the work that we're doing is that we're seeing a lot more venison. Not that our people are starting to eat more, specifically more on our dinner tables during Thanksgiving. We kind of are like, yeah, we're very honored to be able to be connected in that sense, and so I'm really thankful for that in our community too. Yeah, squashes, pumpkins, all that good stuff.
So you said you and Sister Squash don't get along. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah.
You just don't like squash?
I don't like squash. I don't like squash.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do on your day-to-day stuff in the cannery? What kind of things are you processing? What kind of things are out there for people to buy?
Yeah, so our big and main responsibility is take care of our Onasta white corn. And Junhinkwa is a certified organic farm that takes care of our white corn. And the amazing thing, I believe, with my time at the cannery and my longevity there is I've been able to be a part of. At first it was the reintroduction, and that was our mission statement. And now it's about the demand and keeping up with the demand. So when I started, ages ago, we had corn in storage. We had to really work with our programming, whether it was our school system, our elderly feeding, our community, because it seemed like we were only eating corn during special events. And so it was like, again, how do we integrate it even more? And so that, again, is probably one of our biggest success stories, is from just a couple thousand pounds of white corn. We are maxing out at about 10 to 12,000 pounds of white corn that we process. And the cannery is kind of like a really cool kitchen where you get to kind of really have fun and explore different recipes. And sometimes it was like, can we do this? Should we do this? Should we do conventional ways? Because we really also work on our traditional methods and preservation. So we worked with USDA as well with looking at wood ash to be on the ingredient list. And so that gives us and it's not just us, because we have an amazing food system. We have where we're able to self-regulate ourselves, and we have people definitely educated. We don't wing it. And so that's the great thing about us, is that we're really invested in it. And it's our own people, and we're really invested in our food system, in the ways that we feed our people and giving them access to it. And so we're able to create multiple products from our white corn. And again, it's to really integrate foods in a way that we're looking at community members that live fast lives, right? So we can't necessarily slow them down. That's not our responsibility. So what we need to do is look at ways to create production so that it's easy and it's quick. And so, for instance, one of our corn soups, we've got into freeze drying, which is a very conventional food production method. And, there was always this vision of ramen in a cup, right? We've all lived off ramen in a cup in one way or another. And it was like, could we do this with corn soup, and what was that method? And so we are able to do the research and development and work with the USDA and be able to get these value-added grants to kind of look into it, into that part. So that's a really cool thing that I get to do. And then it's about assisting community members with processing their own goods. So we're really trying to advocate for you to grow your own foods or to hook up with a local farmer, so you know where your foods are coming from. We talk about diabetes a lot. And unfortunately, now we're talking about COVID. So those immune boosters. So then we look at that. And so it's, when I talk about conventional and traditional, the conventional part too is like even getting into raw juicing. So there's so many different fun food production methods that our facility has, and it's a little facility. It's not big by any stretch of the imagination, but what we're able to do is pretty unique and pretty amazing. And so we kind of say that we're a little bit kind of leading Indian country when it comes to food production, because we have the capacity to not just concentrate on one production. You know, whether it's fresh fruit, we have the capacity to do dehydration, freezing, canning. We have the capacity to do. We're also FDA certified, so we'll do low acid canning. So again, there's a lot of cool things that happen, and people will sometimes say, well, are you busy? I'm like, well, yes, I'm incredibly busy, you know, and we go by seasons, and there's never a downtime. It's just on to the next season. And then when we come to the storage season, which is winter months, that's when we're putting all of our corn away. So we're just getting done here with our white corn harvest. And then again, the cool thing about what happens at the cannery is that us ladies are the last ladies to be able to handle that corn. So it's definitely that connection, and very, very prideful too.
Thank you. One of the questions in the chat is around white corn. What makes white corn special, right? It's not the sweet corn that you pick up at the grocery store. What makes white corn special?
Yeah, the protein in it. I mean, in fact, that it's an indigenous corn, and it's one that's centered around our story, our creation story. And there's a lot of characteristics with that white corn. So when we're looking at seed selection, I have a blue corn here, but when we're talking about seed selection, we're looking at 8 rows. And our corn too, when it's kind of matched up as if like a flint corn, like is it a flour corn, is it a soup corn? How do we process? How do we cook with that? As indigenous communities now are really handling their corn. It's absolutely amazing. This movement is now turning into, again, I'll keep going back to it, a way of life, and it's great to be a part of it. And so our white corn, it's not just for flour, it's not just for soup, and that's the other great thing, is that we're able to use it in so many different ways. So we do flours with it, and we roast, and then we hull and dehydrate, and then grind it, and then we're able to, make mush, make bread with it, use it as fresh hull, and add it into our soups. So it's very versatile in that way too, it's great. And at first, there was almost this stigma that you couldn't have fun with it. You know, we were almost afraid, like, can we add it to chili? Can we take out the noodles and add it to chili? Like, who's gonna allow us to do that? You know, are they saying go for it? And who's they? You know? And so I remember Vicki Matson. She was the one that really taught me to play with it and to have fun. And I'll forever remember that.
So do you grow other types of corn out at John-Hinqua? And if you don't, how do you protect the white corn from cross-pollination from local farms?
Yeah, great question. We only grow white corn because of cross-pollination, and white corn is our staple. And it's an amazing story about how much corn our community is eating. And like I mentioned, we started with a few thousand pounds, and now we're exceeding 12,000 pounds. And we actually have a resolution that states that we can't take any outside orders. We can't sell anybody necessarily to the outside. Now, can you purchase our items? Yes, we do have retail locations, yes, but I'm talking about larger orders. We get them often, and we're unable to fill them because our community eats so much of it, and it's very low on the glycemic index. So when we're including it into the diets with diabetics, that's what's really cool too. So they're not hitting the spikes, right? So that's one of the main things that they really are concerned with. And the difference between, you know, conventional corn and like fill corn is we have so much more protein. I can't quite remember the number of it, but it's definitely 3 times, 4 times the amount. And so we say that it's like a complete protein when you're putting our 3 sisters together. That's the other great thing about those ladies.
Absolutely. You talked earlier, Jamie, about like how you look to protect our seeds, our land, our air, our water. Could you speak to the environmental impact or benefit of focusing more on Indigenous foods?
Yeah, and now kind of relate it back to when you're talking about cross-pollination and how do we do that? Because we've got farmers all over the place. We've got field corn all over the place. So we've had to create these barriers of trees around. So if you're at June Hinkle, you'll kind of see this tree line base all around, and it's pretty cool. And we work directly with our environmental health. Matter of fact, we just got moved under them so that we can really look at the soil impacts, you know, and really understand the need for our nation to look at our big farm, their methods, and then our sustainable methods, and really, what are we, if we're talking about it, if we're saying that we are, this is who we are, then we have to do that work. And so we work heavily with NRCS and to make sure that for one, that we're working all together. We're not going to say that we know better or we know better than you, but I can tell you that we know our corn. All right, so we know our corn, we know our foods. And so we need a little bit of that assistance when it comes to soils and things like that. And in the farming and what has happened with the change of farming and what we're looking to do, even with the local farmers around us. So we've been impacted, we've been hit hard, especially with last year, I think it was, with the manure spill that went into the Silver Creek. And we spent so much time, so much energy with building up that Silver Creek, with bringing our fish back, and then the manure spill hit. And let me tell you, that was devastation. So one, they shouldn't even have had that pit. And so we had to actually look in our own backyard and making sure that we're taking care of the policies that were written. Are we following that? Are we checking up with those land contracts and those land rental agreements, and making sure that they are in there, that these specific demands that we have within our environmental, that are in there, so you can't twist words around, you know. So we've learned by devastation too. So don't get me wrong, we've learned, and that's the great thing, is that we get to learn and we get to do better, and we are. So yeah, it's really cool to be a part of it.
Could you also share what food sovereignty means? There's a question in the chat. Do you feel like that term is overused or maybe inappropriately used?
Oh man, I'm gonna get in trouble probably for this one, y'all. Oh man, so I've been around for a long time, and I know that I'm just quite pushing 40, but I've been around these talks about food sovereignty and defining it within Indigenous communities. And so I'm just a snot-nosed kid. So I've heard food sovereignty term used over and over and over. So, you know, it's defined as giving us the right to access healthy and culturally appropriate foods, and then giving us the right, you know, to be able to defend our own food systems. And Oneida, which is great about Oneida, and I don't want to just keep saying Oneida, but what's really great is that we have this food system that we're able to, as I mentioned before, we have a food code, and the food code protects our traditional methods, you know. So when FDA or USDA does not want to protect it because they may not know enough about it, we know enough about it, and we have all the moving parts to protect. And so that's the big part of having that food code. And so also when there are regulated, for instance, our school systems and our elderly feeding that are regulated by BIE or BIA funds, and you have to, in order to feed our kids, in order to feed our elders, they have to be regulated by USDA. Our food code allows us to implement those foods and integrate those foods into those programs. And that's what's great about food sovereignty. And that's what's, I think, is the success of food sovereignty, is being able to share our food code, be able to work with, like, you'll hear University of Arkansas, and Janie Hipp has done such an amazing job to be Janie Hipp. That's me. And really looking to help nations, because again, you know, go back to Monsanto, is that Oneida has a really good legal system. You know, we can kind of fend and fund and take care of our legal rights. There's other nations that can't do that, you know, so how do we protect them? And that's how the food sovereignty then really start to become this movement, because you had you know, Dene, you had Navajo sheep, and they were now no longer to be able to sell their mutton to local, you know, markets and things like that. So we're talking about even the Food Modernization Act. And then at first it was not allowing the nations to have a seat at the table. You're talking on behalf of us, but we don't get a say, you know? So that was like, again, the work of Jeannie Hip is like getting us at the table there, so that you can't just define us as if we're all Oneida, or you can't just define us as if we're Navajo Nation, right? And so again, it gives each nation the ability to do that. So now go back to, is it used a lot? Is it a buzzword? When you're talking about sovereignty, you know, now there's a lot of programs within universities, and there's degrees, and then there's scholars, and they're becoming very, very good at talking about food sovereignty, you know, but sometimes our initiatives is about food security. And that's what I talk often about too, is that it's giving access then to our community members at affordable foods, because sometimes, as great as our food system is, sometimes it kind of fails us when we look at the price of food. And we want to give our community members and work towards giving them the ability to have nutritional food. So our grass-fed beef, you know, should not be at a higher rate for an outside community member. We should be able to give them the ability to afford it. And that's one of the movements and work that I really want to do and continue to do, and not fight around so much about it. So yeah, there's a lot of talk and a lot of buzz around it. But what I look at is those that are doing it. And what I look at and what I always get inspired at is those that do it with little to no funds, little to no support, grassroots, they're doing it. And that's what I get excited about. And that's what I just like pull from. And I try to get humbled when I myself have a lot of access to do this, this, and this. I'm constantly reminded.
Thank you for that. There's a question from Facebook. It is, what is one thing that a non-Native culture can do to make a difference in regarding the dominant narrative that we all have grown up with about Thanksgiving? What's one thing we in a non-Native culture can do to make a difference in that?
It's the acknowledgement that what you know about Thanksgiving is not true. It's just the acknowledgement to know a little bit more about the traumas that Indigenous people have gone through and still go through today. And so when we talk about like historical traumas, that could even have, historical can even mean yesterday, you know, so it doesn't mean that it happened thousands or 100 years ago as well. And I learned that term, and that just hit me too. And so it's just, you know, about that acknowledgement, as well as maybe, you know, I'm Irish too. So I think about, and what we do too, is we don't just look at our Oneida Indigenous food, we look at the Irish. So we're making some Irish stew, you know, and when we think about, you know, this is so funny because we think about these res sandwiches that are, you know, with potato chips and like bologna, but that's like an Irish snack. That's where that came from. So I want to also make sure that my son knows who he is. He's Irish, you know, he's Oneida, and that poor kid is Polish too. so he's gonna know who he is in all of the worlds, you know, and so that's the acknowledgement as well that we have to who he is, and his other family. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, definitely. Because I know folks struggle with celebrating Thanksgiving and knowing what the actual story of Thanksgiving is. And I know people are struggling with, how do I celebrate that in a socially, you know, responsible way?
Yeah, it's so funny because, you have SNL that have like the funny Thanksgiving skits, and MTV has had the funny skits, and it could be all, black folk in one family saying the same thing as white folks and the same thing as indigenous folks who are not connected, so that's kind of the irony of it too. And I'm not here to tell you to not do Thanksgiving or what to believe in. I'm just here to give you a little bit of awareness of what Thanksgiving is and what that mourning piece is, and why it's important to us. And so for you to have some compassion in that sense, some empathy in that sense, and that, again, that we're not glossing over, right? We're not glossing over this crazy storyline. And I'm not saying that, you have to, you need to feel what we're feeling. No, that's on you. That's on you. We all feel things differently. And so that acknowledged piece, just as anybody, they want to be acknowledged. And I think that's important.
We have one last question in the chat. Could you share the recipe for Oneida white corn pierogies? Is that how you say it?
That's my grandma's recipe. I can't even share that. No, I'm just kidding. And so our corn soup recipe is so simple, and again, this is one of the great things about using indigenous recipes too, or ingredients. So it's not about just using smoked turkey hocks, but smoked turkey legs, but that's what we really love. But it's also about the pork hocks. It's also about what else do people use for the meat base to it. And then the beans. So we add a bean to it. And that's the fun thing too, is that when you learn about the nutrition of foods, you really look at different types of ingredients. And I think that's the other thing that has brought me closer to our foods, is that it wasn't just the kidney bean that I had to use. And that's what I grew up learning, is like, you just use the kidney bean. But we have now our bear beans. We have our cranberry beans. We have so many different indigenous beans, and that's what we're growing. And we want to be able to continue to grow those so that our community has access to them. And then our Gunnastohal is simply our corn that is ground into flour. We mix it with beans and we boil it. So it's not a baked or yellow, cornbread, and it's yummy. And so for Thanksgiving, we don't say Thanksgiving, we do say the holiday. We do take orders though, again, to give you the ability, the access to indigenous foods for your holiday dinner. And we did about, we pounded out about 600 of our Gunnastohal. And so we take orders, and we'll probably do about 1,000 just for the month of November. Again, that just shows you the capacity and the inventory and the amounts that our people are eating. And I'll talk about that all day long. It's amazing to me.
Okay, so no pierogi recipe.
No, sorry.
So one other thing I'm thinking about is I love to try different foods, right? So we have access in Green Bay. We have access to Mexican restaurants. We have access to American. We have access to Indian restaurants. How do we get access to eat the delicious foods that are you're speaking about? How do we get access to that?
Well, you have access to our products. So we have our products located at our Larson One Stop, and we have our products located at our 54 One Stop, and I think they're going to give you information on those contacts. But the other great thing that I want to talk about is our relationship within our vendors and our enterprises within Oneida, within our internal organizational structure. So we have partnered with our Radisson, and I have to tell you, if I can just continue to plug our Radisson, and the work that they've done through COVID has been absolutely just amazing. They've gone through a renovation that had started before, and they had to finish, and they redid their entire kitchen, and it's absolutely beautiful. And so what they have put on there and what they're really doing is sustainable. So they have local beer, local wine, and local ingredients. So they use our apple orchard, and they put apples on their menu. we processed for them, so that's the great relationship. And they also have white corn on their menu too, so they've been able to really have fun with it. So who would have known? This is what I'm talking about really having fun with our foods. Is we are Wisconsin, so we're cheese eating machines. We all are. And the amazing thing that they did was they incorporated our roasted mush flour into their breading. So it is white corn cheese curds, and they are so delightful, amazing. And then they have this amazing walleye that they bread it with our white corn. And so there's a lot of good stuff on that menu. So please go ahead and please check them out. It's one of those like dinner dates. You probably can't go there all the time, but definitely get you a date and hit up the Radisson.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jamie. Such great information. I love the stories that you shared with us, and just really grateful for the time that you spent with us this evening. I do want to, though, I want to leave folks with opportunities to engage further and think a little bit deeper. I like to call it kind of our plan, our call to action. So some of the things I'm asking folks that are on this call or maybe watching via Facebook, there's a couple of things that you can do starting today. Learn more about the work that Joshua is doing within our community. You have opportunities to attend meetings. We are doing them all via Zoom. One of the task force that we have is our environmental task force, and food and environment go hand in hand. So I highly encourage you to visit our website, and there they'll have a schedule of task force times and our Zoom call-ins for that. I also encourage, if you are from a faith community, asking your church to get involved with Joshua. We are a faith-based organization, and we do the work we do because of the connections we have with our local churches. So if you are interested in seeing if your church is a member of Joshua or would like to become a member of Joshua, please feel free to reach out to myself. And then I also want to encourage folks on this call to celebrate the resilience of Indigenous people by supporting Indigenous people. Jamie talked about the delicious things that I didn't even know were on the menu at the Radisson. So supporting Indigenous folks by buying their food. One of the things that you can do is make a date to the Radisson. The cannery is where Jamie is located, and she's the one who's helping produce all these wonderful things for us to consume. Highway 54 One Stop is a place that you can go and pick up product. And then on Larson and Packerland, you know where those intersections are, there's a one-stop/market in there, and you can also pick up some products from there as well. But I also encourage you to read from Indigenous authors. Read what those folks are doing. Support Indigenous authors. Buy Indigenous art. As we're getting towards the gift-giving season, why not shop locally, shop small, and support small businesses and Indigenous artists? And another thing that I really encourage people to do is kind of expand your circle. Look for Indigenous accounts to follow on social media. It's a really great way to get connected with communities that you might not know a ton about and learn a little bit more. But the one thing that you could surely do as you sit around your table on Thursday is say a prayer. Say a prayer of thanksgiving for our Indigenous people. Maureen? You're on mute, Maureen.
Sorry. We'd like to thank you for joining us this evening. We hope that you've enjoyed learning about the meaning of Thanksgiving to Native people as they celebrate their resilience through genocide. Native people are survivors. We are still here thriving and cultivating our Indigenous food, and that is something to be thankful for. So we encourage you to email joshuaforjustice@gmail.com if you'd like more information about joining Joshua or having your church join Joshua. And you can also find us at Joshua for Justice on the web.
Have a great day. Have a great evening. Thank you for joining us.